Well, welcome once again to the Aftermath podcast. And what we have today is Mick, your co host, the Doctor of Digital, and of course, my awesome co host, Kendra, and who is she's legislative tiger. We also then have a special guest today on the Aftermath, and that's Dawn Rishard. And I think she's the love coach, is that right? And some interesting background. So we want to welcome her to the show. Thank you, Dawn, for taking out some time to chat with us today.
Thanks for having me, Mick and
Can you
Kendra. I'm
tell us a
really
little bit about
excited to
yourself?
dive deep.
Good.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I go ahead.
I think you're on a delay, Mick. Dawn, take over.
So anyways, thanks for having me. I'm super grateful to be here. And I really appreciate the opportunity to share both my experience and what we're here to talk about is really the aftermath of divorce, because it's messy and it's complicated. And I have been a licensed professional counselor for about 20 years, and my specialty was helping couples heal their marriages. And yet I couldn't fix my own. And so the irony, right? The irony. And
Yes.
we went to therapy 4 different times in our marriage. And we just had a lot of power struggles, a lot of arguments and fighting and stress and tension. And I thought, I don't want my kids to think that this is what marriage should be. And so really, that's the main reason why I got divorced. It's like, what are the lessons that I want to tell them? And so I knew that I wanted to teach them, of course, love and compassion and responsibility and accountability, as well as forgiveness. But I also wanted to teach them boundaries and kindness and consideration, and just being aware of how you show up in relationship, because a lot of times we just point the finger, but then we forget that there are 3 fingers pointing back at ourselves.
Mm-hmm. I think that's interesting, Dawn, you bring that up. So I think a lot of times people struggle. They go to counseling. You said 4 times you went to counseling, 4 different counselors.
For 3 different counselors, but 4
Okay.
times. And the one counselor that we saw twice, it was for like 2 years the first time and 6 months to a year the second time.
So I think a lot of people struggle that listen to our podcast. They might be struggling with, how do you know when is the time to, draw the line in the sand and say, okay, we're done. And I thought it was very interesting how you said this is not what you want your kids to see as a marriage.
Yeah.
So at what point did you know this wasn't working?
Well, that's really interesting, Kendra. I mean, I was married for 27 years, and I think my first break was around the 15-year mark, where I just said, this is not the marriage that I signed up for. And so we had a little bit of an emotional separation. And then for about a year, we went to a retreat for people going through divorce, and we changed the way that we related. And so for a year, it was like, oh my gosh, this is the marriage that I wanted. We had a lot of open communication, a lot of heart to heart conversations. That I felt much more supported and acknowledged and respected during that time. And so I thought, oh my gosh, we can do this. This is the man that I fell in love with. And so for a while, we had this amazing relationship, and then things started to fall backwards. And I felt like the patterns that were the issues before, they just kept showing up. And so we went back to therapy for 2 years, and I was validated. I mean, I was validated in the sense of the things that I was thinking in my head. The therapist was like, yeah, that's not okay. Mm-hmm. And then for him, I felt like he had a lot of emotional issues that he carried from his childhood, which we all do.
Sure.
But I really felt like he wasn't taking responsibility for working on them, for processing them, for healing them. And so, I mean, I stayed another 12 years, which in my head, I'm like, crazy. Why would you stay that long? But for me, I was raised Catholic, so marriage was sacred. and I'm a therapist. Like, I should be able to fix this. So I just wanted to, for myself, it's like I had to do everything in my power to say I did everything in my power, you
Mhm.
know? And I just kept holding on to hope. And I remember the last time that we went to therapy, which was just like 3 years, 3 years, 2 or 3 years before we got divorced. She said, Dawn, this is the first time I've seen you without hope. And I
Aw.
said, yeah, you're right. I've given up hope for what I thought we could create because we're just in these similar patterns. So
Mhm.
I know it's different for everybody. I'm sure people would say 27 years, that's a long time to wait around. I mean, it is. But I had to do everything in my power to then say, I did everything in my power and nothing worked. And so I had to feel good about my own breaking point to say,
Sure.
I don't want to spend the rest of my life in this same negative cycle.
Sure. So how did that affect you? I had two-part question with this. How did it affect you as a therapist? Did
Mhm.
you feel, I guess if I put myself in your shoes, during my divorce, I felt like I failed, right?
Oh,
And
yeah.
I
Complete
didn't even
failure.
initiate the divorce,
Mm,
but I felt like a failure. So how does that
yeah.
affect you when you're in that is your career, and you tried for so long?
Yeah, that's really interesting because I did feel like a failure. I felt a lot of shame. I felt a lot of shame, like, why can't I fix this? What's the matter with me? And I recognized, and part of my healing journey was tango, which is strange, but really interesting because I'm a dancer, and there were a lot of life and love and relationship lessons in the dance of tango, and that two people are standing on their own in tango, and in your relationship you stand on your own 2 feet, and what you do with yourself is your responsibility. So if I choose to go one direction or the other, that's on me. But in your partnership, you have this sense of leaning towards each other, and you have to, ebb and flow with each other in the relationship. But I found myself ebbing and flowing, and he was very rigid,
Mhm.
and so there was no sense of leaning towards each other. And in a relationship, you have to lean on each other. You have to have each other's backs. You have to be able to be open and honest about what's going on for you. And I didn't feel like that ever really happened. I mean, there were spaces in our marriage where that happened, but overall, it was more like you do your thing, and I do my thing, and then there was not, there was this lack of connection and this lack of intimacy and this lack of support. And so I didn't, I mean, that's why I didn't want my kids to think that that was okay.
Mm. Yeah.
It's like we all ebb and flow in relationships. We all have our issues. We all have our struggles. But how we show up and how we treat people, actions speak much louder than words.
Mhm. Yeah, and I love that, the tango. I absolutely love staying on your own. So, I guess fast forward now, and let's talk about how not only just you, but how you help others heal from a divorce.
Yeah, so this is the fascinating thing. I mean, we were just talking before we started this, and many people jump into the next relationship. Like, okay, I'm done with that person. I'm angry. I'm over it. I'm moving on with my life. But moving on means ignoring where I am and what I've been through and all of the chaos and multitude of emotions that I've experienced. A lot of people just stuff them down and ignore 'em, sweep them under the rug. They'll go away. And they don't. By the way, they don't. You can
I feel like
pretend.
you shouldn't be whispering that, but we should shout that, right? They don't go
They
away.
don't go away, people. Whatever you're carrying with you in this moment, you carry into the next relationship. So if you're carrying unresolved anger, unresolved grief, unresolved sadness, you carry those in you. And things will come up in your relationship. You'll be triggered because all of our relationships, we trigger each other. And so that's why I recognized that grief which we don't talk about in our culture and in many cultures all over the world. Grief, whether it's a death, a physical death with a person, it's like, how you doing? Just get over it. It's been a year. It's like, that's not how grief works. And so I recognize that grief is a process that we all go through, whether or not we acknowledge it. But I feel like it's the key to moving forward in your life in a healthy way. And grief doesn't mean getting over it. It means getting through it and learning how to redefine your life without the other person in it. So all of the lost hopes and dreams that you had for your marriage, all of the lost hopes and dreams that you had for your kids, all the lost hopes and dreams that you had for your future. I mean, all of those things you need to process and learn how to deal with. So there's a lot of, sadness, anger, resentment, judgment, criticism, a lot of self-blame or other blame or guilt. I mean, all of the things that cause that division in your marriage. Those are all of the things that you need to process in order to move forward so that you come to your next relationship from a place of wholeness instead of a place of neediness. So when you have grieved in a healthy way, and it's never done, by the way, it's never done. I mean, things can come up 3 years down the road, 5 years down the road. And you're like, wow, where'd that come from? So I think a couple weeks ago, I was crying and I was like, I feel, sometimes I still feel sad, that my kids don't have this, beautiful container with a husband and a wife. And it makes me sad. And yet I know that we're all happier. My kids have a sense of peace. And I think that sense of peace is really the telltale sign of when you are more healed. That you feel like, you know what, I'm okay. I am enough. I am worthy of love. I am a good person. I experienced this mess and chaos and stress and tension in my marriage, but that doesn't make me a failure as a person. It just means I learned a lot of things in my marriage about what I don't want to do next time and what I do want to do differently.
I'd like to follow up, and this is very ironic when you said you're a dancer. Actually, I
Uh-huh.
wrote my dissertation on dance, and I used
You
the phrase
did?
actions speak louder than words. But hold
Uh-huh.
on, I got more. Now, I'm also thinking of when you said tango, the phrase came to me while we were talking about it. It takes two to tango, right? But what does it take to two to untango? And what I mean by that is when you have your baggage and the things that you're bringing to relationship and the other person is, how do you untango what you have as opposed to what they have? And that's really, I think, a key question to be thinking about.
Well, that's a key question in all relationships, because we all have things that come up for us, and we all experience similar ways that we feel hurt and ways that we feel not acknowledged or not accepted for who we are. And so, people experience a sense of rejection, people experience a sense of abandonment, people experience a sense of I don't belong, like a feeling of I don't belong or I don't matter or I'm not worthy of love. I mean, these are all parts of our human experience based on, I'm a systems therapist. So, based on your family of origin, what were you taught about those things? I belong, I matter, I feel safe, I'm lovable, I'm worthy. And so, all of our relationships are a reflection of those things that sometimes we feel lacking. And so part of the healing process, basically all of the healing process is about learning what those triggers are and how to recognize them in yourself when your partner or your kid or your mom or your friend is triggering you and you think, oh, I'm feeling, put off or I'm feeling threatened in some way. or I'm feeling not acknowledged or not listened to. And so all of these things are ways for us to become more conscious and conscientious about who am I in this moment and how am I showing up. So all the untangoing is really processing that past behavior or that past reaction when you're reacting in the moment and learning how to respond in a different way. So it's having this third party objective perspective to say, oh, I'm doing that thing again, or I'm feeling that sense of angst in my body, because I think that all of these actions and reactions our body experiences. So whether it's feeling like punched in the gut, or you feel like this weight on your chest, or you feel like this tightness and constriction in your throat, I mean, all of these physical signs that our body gives us that are related to the emotions that are going through us. Does that make sense?
It sure does. Yeah. And let me try to follow up here a little bit too. I'm curious about this couple's type of relationship or in a close relationship. And one of the things that I experienced, because I always talk about my parents and I said they're the love story of my life because they
Mm.
did really had the ideal marriage. They knew each other since they were 4 years old, grew up in a
Oh,
small town
wow.
together, went to school together, high school sweethearts, got married young. I mean, all those things. And then, of course, for my pattern, well, that's what I expected too, right? So
Me too.
for first real girlfriend I had, I go, "Oh,
Mhm.
well, we're getting married." It's simple as that. And of course, it wasn't that simple.
That was my college boyfriend I did that with, Mick.
See, there you go. But my question is that then having gone through this process of the custody and parental alienation, my
Mm.
impression is that the counselors always kept digging more and more into like my childhood. And I was going, look, guys, I'm not making this up. I just was from a really ideal home.
Right,
But then we get in a relationship with someone who may not be from a ideal home. And that's my
right,
question. Like,
right.
how do we discern who's really carrying the baggage? And I'm not saying I'm perfect, but the thing is, I had a really ideal marriage as a model. And of
Right.
course, I would have liked to have had that in my own life. It just didn't happen.
Right. I experienced very similar things. I mean, my parents are going to be celebrating their 60th anniversary next year. And so this, it was like, oh my gosh, why did I
Mm.
attract this other person in my life? And I think, like people are attracted to people who generally have core values the same. I mean, my husband had a lot of the same core values, even though he came from a divorced family. He wanted a marriage. He wanted to be a better dad to his dad. I mean, to our kids. Um, and I felt like, oh, my family is the model for what he wants. And so I thought that we could make that happen. We could recreate that. But again, it's the both people have to be aware enough and willing to take responsibility for the times that they feel triggered, for the times that they feel insecure, for the times that they feel like, oh, you're just going to walk away from me. And I remember so many times he would say, this isn't working. Let's just get divorced. And sometimes he would pack his bags. And I was like, that is really threatening to me. That makes me feel really insecure, like you're not willing to stay. So even though they were just words, but your words carry an energy, and so both people have to be aware of, like, I would say, when you say that thing, it makes me feel really insecure. Please don't say that thing. It's just words. No, it's words that matter to me. And when you love somebody, you say, oh, that hurts you. So I need to be more aware of how I show up. And maybe I need to like monitor myself sometimes. And not to say that you can't express yourself, but if you know that you're doing something that's hurtful, if you know you're saying things that are hurtful, I mean, you should want to be loving and kind to your partner. You should want to be respectful. You should want to be supportive and create a safe container for them. You have to create a safe container for yourself first, which is why you do this work, why this work is so important. that you have a sense of safety and trust and responsibility and accountability to yourself for how you are showing up in your relationship on a daily basis. The actions speak louder than words, and how you are relating to the other person. My parents went through the marriage encounter movement in the 70s,
Mhm.
which I got a lot of this information from. And the premise of the encounter movement, which my parents taught us, was either you're building a bridge of connection where you feel safe and trust and you feel like you're walking side by side, or you're building a wall between you. Like, I remember sleeping next to my husband and feeling millions of miles away. And so, are you doing things that are helpful and creating that sense of connection, or are you doing things that are hurtful and building these big walls between you?
That's so important. So, do you think couples therapy very early on when you're getting into a new relationship is
Oh,
helpful?
yeah.
Okay, I thought so. I am a huge believer of therapy individually. And I think when my marriage started to fail, we were too late to go to therapy. We
Mm,
tried it a few times, but I think we were just too late at that point. So my question is, can you start earlier in therapy?
yeah. I mean, I feel like this is the thing. Okay. There's been a lot of stigma around therapy, mental health. I mean, all of the things that we used to cover up in the past, because we were ashamed. We didn't want to talk about it, sweep it under the rug. That doesn't work for anybody. Right. And so I feel like, okay, are you going to wait to eat healthy? Are you going to wait till you get cancer to start eating healthy? Are you going to wait till you get lung cancer to stop smoking? Are you going to wait to, to go to therapy to fix your relationship until it's completely broken and there's no hope? I
Mhm.
mean, I feel like all my perspective is you want to do things that enhance your life, right? We're all constantly changing and growing and evolving. So, are you doing things that help grow you physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, psychologically? And that's, I mean, look at my bookshelf, for for goodness sakes. So, this is my perspective from my whole life. And I mean, my dad, both my parents are voracious readers, but both my parents were like the power of positive thinking, and I mean, all of these things which enhance your life and make life a little easier for you. And so, why wouldn't you do that for your marriage, for your relationships? So I believe in being proactive and having, monthly check-ins or annual check-ins, or even one of my therapist mentors, her name's Esther Perel. She says marriage should be an annual contract with an option to renew.
Hmm.
Now, if you had that perspective, or a monthly contract with an option to renew, if you had sort of these smaller time chunks where you were taking complete responsibility for how it's going, then I think people would not take things for granted. I think people would take more responsibility and more accountability if you can have these open and honest conversations about, this is what's working well, because you always want to talk, have gratitude and thanks for the things that are going well. And then you say, these are the areas for improvement. So, and so it's not like a blame game. It's not, judgment and a bunch of anger, but it's kind of an ongoing basis of, how can we make this better for both of us? Because I think a lot of times in relationships, some people acquiesce, some people give, and the other person takes, and there's not really a balance of giving and receiving. And so if both people can learn to give, have this ebb and flow of giving and receiving, and it's not equal day to day, it's kind of an equality or equity over time. And to say, how can I show up more loving, more kind, more accepting? How can I be more supportive of you? What do you need from me? Instead of saying, well, you're not doing this for me and you're not doing that for me. So there's a sense of service, and there's a sense of also giving.
I like that. I really like that. So I want to take it back a few steps before you get into a new relationship and go into how you learn to love yourself. And
Mm,
I know a couple of the people that I've mentored, they've really struggled from having the divorce and separating from their children,
yeah,
or because the children they identify with their children, right? So once you take the children out of their life half the time, if they're 50-50, it was really hard for them to work through that and figure out, what do I do with my time? Because I've just
right,
serviced my children the whole time.
right.
So how do you learn to love yourself and kind of, disconnect from your partner and your children?
Well, this is really fascinating because for the last couple years I've been feeling like healing from heartbreak, healing your heart, all of these things. And now actually I just created this program called Realign to Love, reset your heart through separation and divorce. And that's really what it is. Like if you think about what happens when you get divorced, it's like you build this armor around your heart. And this is what most people tell me. Like there's this sense of, I need to protect myself. I feel numb. I don't recognize myself. Who is this person I've become? Are all these resonating?
Yes, yes. I'm shaking my head. Yes.
so, so really, I mean, for me, it all comes back to a sense of love and acceptance for myself. So, how can I acknowledge? I mean, because this is one of the things when my husband and I were talking about getting divorced, he's like, "We totally screwed up. We're terrible people." And I was like, "You can speak for yourself because you probably feel that way. And I mean, there are times when I feel that way, but really, I know I'm a good person. I know I have a caring heart. I know I'm kind and compassionate. I have a lot of compassion. I, anyways, um, and this is something that you have to recognize your good qualities. I mean, we always have light, good qualities in ourselves, and we always have dark shadow parts of ourselves that we need to bring to the light.
Mhm.
And so it's really a matter of reminding yourself of all the good things, finding help, whether it's therapy who can help, help you process all of the things that you've been through and how you want, and to coach you through where you want to go. Um, you have finding a support group, a group of people who understand your experience, whether it's a friend or, a community, um, and and really relearning how to love yourself, relearning how to love yourself, because a lot of times you feel like, what did I do wrong? Why am I not enough? And you know what? No matter what you've been through and where you want to go, you are enough.
Mhm.
You're enough. You're worthy of love. No matter what you struggle with, we we all want to be valued and validated and feel important, like our lives matter. And I think a lot of times through the divorce process, we forget that, or maybe we didn't even know that to begin with. And so I really feel it's like a place of becoming more whole within yourself, and it's reconnecting your body, mind, heart, spirit when you've been so disconnected and out of alignment. You feel like off balance through your marriage and through the divorce and the aftermath. Like, how are you going to feel whole again? How are you going to create that sense of safety and trust for yourself? How are you going to create that? You know what? I'm pretty amazing. I have specific gifts and talents that I bring to the relationship table or bring to the world. And it's really like, what kind of partner do I want to become? Not just who's the partner that I want to find.
Ooh, that's good. That's really good. That is self-reflection right there.
Yeah.
I had a question about when you said a support group or somewhere to find resources. Like one of the things that I was going through this horrible process, I did have a support group through a church. It was single parents, and eventually wrote a novel, but based on every week we were coming back, and I said, I got basically a story, because they would start asking me week after week, well, what happened this week? Because it was like, yeah, it was an unfolding episode. So I go, yeah, I know, I'm not making this stuff up, but this is what happened. But the point is, I said, yeah, it probably is a pretty decent story. And that's why I wrote a novel about my experiences. But I,
Mm,
my question would be, support groups or others, are the people qualified, and who's qualified? In other words, sometimes people would feel that they should go to, because if you have a religious background, a rabbi, a priest, a minister, are
Mhm.
they equipped, do you think, by and large, or do you think professionals, or do you think a support group, all three? What are the pros and cons about probably those three different options that you could find for support?
Well, I think that's a great question. Actually, that's something that I've been figuring out how I can support people going through a divorce, because a lot of times your friends, unless they've experienced divorce, they have no idea what you're going through. My parents, they've never experienced divorce, even though my dad's parents got divorced when he was young. But so the spiritual leader, I mean, they can guide you, I think, from a spiritual perspective, because that's their perspective. But like, my priest has never been married, so he doesn't know what it's like to be married and to have that chaos. Um, the therapist, yes, I think therapy is helpful for anybody if they're a good therapist. If they can deconstruct, what's gone on for you. And even like Mick, when you were talking about, well, my family of origin was fine. Well, why did you choose the partner that you chose? And what kind of issues did you have in your marriage that was not like, was not similar to your relationship that your parents had? I mean, somebody that can unpack all of those things. And then a support group. I mean, because this is the thing about divorce. And when you're going through the chaos before the divorce, most people suffer in silence. Most people suffer in silence because you carry a lot of shame. You put on this pretty face to the outside world. How are you doing? Oh, I'm fine. I'm fine. You're not fine, but you don't want to share that because you have to, you have to. People want to put up this image. I mean, I'm sure you can think of many, many couples that they get divorced and you're like, wow, that's a shock. Well, everything hides behind closed doors, right? And so one of the things that I wanted to do is like, I wanted to provide one-on-one coaching. And I also want to provide a group setting for women, especially because I'm a woman, because I feel like women carry a different set of circumstances in their relationships, that may or may not be similar to men. But to have a sense of validation of your experience as a woman in a relationship dealing with whatever you were dealing with. So for instance, narcissism or toxicity or addictions or depression or whatever the situation is. But to have other people around you that can help mentor you and support you, like AA. I actually went to Al-Anon for 5 years. And I remember the first time I went there, somebody said, I was tired of being on the roller coaster of my partner's emotional, ride. And I started bawling. I was like, oh my gosh, somebody else has been experiencing this. And I thought that I was just going crazy. And so to have that sense of community and that sense of validation where other people can say, yeah, I get it. You're not alone. And I think so many times we feel alone through that stress and tension of our marriage, or through the betrayal. If people have experienced affairs or betrayal in the marriage, or the aftermath of the divorce, and it's messy and chaotic, and there's still anger and resentment. So if all three, I feel like you should ask. We in our society, we're conditioned not to ask for help. And there's no shame and judgment in asking for help. And I feel like, when you have kids and you teach them how to walk, they fall and they fall and they fall and they fall. And do you ever say, get up, you idiot? No, you don't. You give them a hand down, right? You give them a hand down to help them up. And sometimes we need to raise our hand up so that somebody else can help lift us up. And so I think, if we can all normalize asking for help and getting support, that's half the battle. So that you feel okay and I'm a mess and I'm struggling right now, but I know eventually I'll get through this. I'll get through it, not over it. I'll get through it. and I will be better on the other side because I will learn a lot about standing up for myself, speaking up for myself, creating a sense of safety and trust within myself, loving myself unconditionally to know that I'm okay and I will be okay and I'll be stronger and more resilient for what I've gone through.
Yeah, I think you bring up several good points there, Dawn. One is don't stop asking for help because you might find a therapist that might not be right. So reach out to a different therapist, try a different one, try a different support group. I know, I'm the kind of person who bounces pretty fast. Not that I didn't want to process what has happened and come through it on the other side better, but I didn't want to stay in that negative environment for a long time. And one of the church groups that I found that was divorce support, everybody was just coming there and it was just a
trauma dumping.
Feel. Yes. Oh my gosh. And so I said, I can't be associated with this because I'm trying to move forward, not stay where I'm at. So my point is don't give up, because I think your point of finding the right therapist, finding the right support group, keep looking for those people to support you, and not just from an emotional standpoint, but financially. If you need help, raise your hand, right? If you're a single mom, you need help, raise your hand. If you have your kids for, a certain amount of time, mine was 50-50, right? I had to have friends help me get them from school because I was also working full time. Don't have shame in that, right? I mean, everybody, I think, in this world needs help at some point. So
it takes a village, right?
It does. It takes a village. So especially
for ourselves too, not just for our kids.
Yes. So reach out. I reached out several times to different friends on activities to do. And my motto was, I'm not saying no to anything unless it's harmful to my health or, mentally or physically. But let's go do kickboxing. I've never done it before. Wow. Let's go, be with horses in the barn. Okay. I wouldn't say no to anything. I was open to everything because I think all of that helped me heal and move through it and reflect in different perspectives rather than eating the tub of ice cream and watching Bad Moms, which I did.
Which but I also all do. But that openness, Kendra, I think is the key in life in general. Do you operate out of a place of closed down and fear? Or are you operating out of a place of openness and curiosity and exploring what's possible? Are you limiting yourself or are you exploring the possibilities? And for me, I want to be open because the universe, God, creator, source. I mean, there's so many beautiful, beautiful people that I've met in my life, opportunities that have come through my divorce, my podcast, these connections, networking. I mean, sharing these stories to recognize that these are all part of our human condition. And so instead of isolating and feeling badly about ourselves, it's like, oh, wow, okay, I'm not the only one and I can get through this and there's hope for me. And there are really amazing, incredible, more beautiful things on the other side of the aftermath, right? Yes. It's like the destruction, the fires, the destruction that tears everything down. And what comes in the forest afterwards? New growth, rebirth, yes. Bigger, stronger, more blossoming things.
100% agree. So, Dawn, you have a podcast you mentioned. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I do. It's my passion project. It's called Wake Up to Real Love because I, the relationship expert, had issues in my marriage. And I thought, if I can't figure this stuff out, there are a lot of people who can't figure this stuff out. But I created the Wake Up to Real Love podcast show, Wake Up to Real Love show, because I wanted to normalize our relationship struggles and not just intimate partnerships. I wanted to normalize all the things that we experience throughout our life, addiction, depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation, childhood sexual trauma, abuse, addictions, all the ways that people suffer and feel badly about themselves. I wanted to normalize them and give people hope that there's ways to get through and come out on the other side. And so I interview experts in the field who deal with mental health and emotional health issues, because from their perspective, I learn so much every time that that I interview somebody. And then I interview lay people who've overcome all the things that I talked about, who found healing and hope through whatever ways they found healing and hope. So I feel like it's just a resource for people to come and say, oh, that's the thing that I'm struggling with. How can I find hope? Because the message or the mantra of the podcast is the most important relationship you'll ever have is the one you have with yourself. Because when you take care of that, when you realign and rebalance and reconnect your mind, body, heart, and soul, and you create that sense of, safety and trust and love and acceptance and compassion and kindness and forgiveness for yourself, then you can learn how to extend that same grace to other people. And really, no matter what we've experienced, we're all worthy of love. And that's really the overall message. So wake up to real love is you're worthy of love, no matter what.
Wonderful. I love it.
And do you have any other questions, Kendra, or do you
I
want to say?
don't.
Okay, I mean, I'm just kind of blown away with all the knowledge and wisdom and good
Oh, thank
things. I go
you.
back and listen to these things again because I learned just what you had said in podcasting. I learn a lot, so
I do.
I have to absorb a little bit of this as well. But thank you for being our guest today. It was really
You're
awesome. You had
welcome.
a lot of really good ideas, and I got to go back and listen to our own podcasts myself to
Yeah.
really absorb it. So
Thank you
thank
so
you for
much
being
for
here.
having me. I appreciate it. I mean, I'm super passionate about sharing this because I know there's a lot of hurt. People carry a lot of hurt, even into the next relationship. It's just like, but that's why it's so important to do your own healing work, to get help and get support, so that you can feel okay about who you are and where you are and what you've been through, knowing that your past does not define you. Your past is only a part of your story, just like you wrote the book. I actually just started writing a book 2 weeks ago because it's like and the next chapter is unwritten. The next chapter is unwritten. So what stories do you want to write for yourself? What kind of person do you want to become? What's the legacy that you want to leave, and what's the message that you're here to share? And so I feel like, even though I struggled and had all of these negative experiences in my marriage, I learned so much. And I want to be able to share to help people through their process so that so it doesn't take them 3 years or 5 years or beyond to say, oh, I'm still feeling stuck. Like you went to that one group and it was like people were just negative. It's like, I want to, even though you have these ebbs and flows and ups and downs, but you can maintain yourself no matter what's going on. Like, okay, I'm experiencing this thing, and what do I need to learn from it? How am I being challenged to grow? What are the lessons that I'm here, to learn? And then how can I turn those lessons into blessings, not only for myself, for my kids, for the world?
Awesome. Well, thanks for being our guest today. It was a learning experience. If you want to contact us, the Aftermath Healing at gmail.com. You have some comments, questions, or experts that and we always ask the same thing. Please subscribe, like, share, review, and positively on Apple. It helps us a lot, and we're here for you. We want you to be healed, and we've got all kinds of experts like Dawn who will come on and tell us all the good things that we want to share. So thanks for being our guest today. That's it for this particular episode. Until next time, Deus Volt.